McIntyre's Methadone, small batch, artisanal methadone for the discerning junkie, is now a proud sponsor of the Dopey podcast. McIntyre's Methadone guarantees a profound respite from the epic withdrawal process. Our research shows that 9 out of 10 dope fiends choose McIntyre's over mainstream methadone. We make kicking fun and flavorful. It comes in Purple People Pleaser, Benzo Berry Bonanza, and 5 Melon Fandango Fizz. And for limited time only, receive a personalized vomit bucket and washcloth. McIntyre's. Crafting the world's finest methadone, one take home at a time.
This episode of Dopey is brought to you by our friends at Aloe Recovery Center in sunny Southern California. Located in Malibu and Silver Lake, Aloe is an amazing treatment center designed to take care of addicts by treating them with compassion, not control. There are so many good things about Aloe, I don't know where to start. I'm going to start with the fact that they make a detox that is comfortable if you're a fucked up junkie or alcoholic or pillhead. If you're scared of the detox, Aloe seems to really make sure that the detox is as comfortable as possible. Another amazing thing about Aloe is that they have over 675 years of combined experience from their staff. They know what they're doing. My favorite thing about Aloe, besides the comfortable detox, are the amazing amenities. They have sweat lodge. They have sound bath meditation. They have surfing. Aloe seems like a great place to go. They take you to meetings if you want to go. If you don't want to go, you don't have to go. If you're fucked and you want to get help and you're a drug addict and you're willing to go to California, I would totally consider going to Aloe. This episode of Dopey is also brought to you by listeners like you, the Dopey Nation. If you want to help out with the show, go to www.patreon.com/dopeypodcast. Give what you can, if you want to. Give $1, give $2, give $50, give $1,000 a month if you feel like it, because your money helps make Dopey better. It helps me with equipment, it helps me with stickers, it helps me pay people if I have to, and it just helps. But if you don't want to pay, you don't have to pay. If you guys are after Dopey stickers, Venmo me. If you're after Dopey hats, you do the same. If you want a t-shirt, you go to www.dopeypodcast.com. And coming soon, finally, the long-awaited DopeyCon. There is more information coming, but enough with the ads. Here is the show. Hello and welcome to Dopey, the podcast about drugs, addiction, and dumb shit. And I'm Dave, and we have a big show. We've got a bunch of guests. A lot of stuff is happening. But before we start, my dad was very upset after the last episode with Aurora, where I said some things that got him very heated, and he wanted to call in. So, Dad, are you still feeling heated, or is it past? Is it too late at night for you to be heated now?
Well, it's way too late at night for me to even be angry, and I was angry. I was really angry. I mean, holy cow! You gave me a 1-star review.
Just wait, hold up. You weren't really angry though. You should have seen him. He came over to the house. Basically, what happened was he heard the episode with Aurora, and what did I say exactly?
Well, you said that I make fun of when you're fooling around trying to find things to say because you don't have it in front of you, and then you said that I criticize Aurora for saying you know, and well, then
Dad, both of those things are totally true though. Both of those things, I don't even remember saying them. The thing I remember saying, and you always used to get angry when I didn't know what I was doing and you hear me mixing around for stuff. You always criticize that stuff. So what's not true?
No, those were true. The thing that wasn't true was you said I had a big ego and you thought that I knew everything there was to know about podcasting, and which of course I don't.
Well, you have a very decent sized ego, and the way you talk about podcasting, you would assume that you think that. But I know that you don't know much about podcasting, and you know that.
Well, that's for sure.
But you do also think that you must know more than I do, because that's just naturally how you get.
Well, when you're fooling around trying to find what to say, I mean, that doesn't sound like a professional podcaster.
Well, I mean, I hate to tell you this, but I'm an incredibly professional podcaster.
Yeah, holy cow, amazing. And by the way, Aurora was terrific last week. She didn't really say, you know. She didn't say that at all. But then what about that one-star review you made up? And you said, you get rid of the old... Well, I'm not going to repeat what you said. Anyway, it was pretty awful, even though you made it up and it wasn't true, correct?
I said that there was a review saying, get rid of the old Jew. We're tired of hearing him on the show.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you think that was a nice thing to say?
Well, I was trying to make the appearance this time be a better appearance. I was trying to give you some fuel for the fire. I'm trying to help you out.
You got me really angry, except nobody in the Dopey Nation even commented about any of this stuff. I guess I was the only one who was angry.
And what did your friend Seymour say when he heard it?
He thought that you guys were right. But listen, I'm the underdog here. I mean, you keep taking advantage of me. That's why the Dopey Nation likes me, because you go too hard on me. That's the truth. That's the truth. In any case, but there is some serious stuff that you mentioned in the last episode that I wanted to say, even though it's serious, not joking, about when you and Aurora are talking about being. Well, the word I'm using is being triggered. In other words, she talked about wanting to drink, and you were talking about how wonderful marijuana is. That's scary for a parent like me. I mean, that doesn't make me feel so great, even though you tried to backtrack at the end. What do you think about that?
I don't think I tried to backtrack. I think most addicts in recovery. I mean, I don't want to have this conversation with you, really, but it's just that most addicts.
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
you know nothing. You know nothing about this,
because
though.
This is serious, right?
No, it's just you don't. I mean, like, did you feel triggered to smoke weed or drink when you heard that, Dad?
Who, me?
Yeah.
No, no.
I mean, you can't be. You're not an addict. The reason I'll tell you, I don't love a lot of 12-step talk on the show. Particularly, I like a little, and I like a little bit of recovery talk. But whenever I feel like it goes real far into the recovery talk, I like to talk about the addiction part, because I just don't like the way the recovery part sounds like on a podcast. Like,
I know, but I understand. But you made it sound too good. In terms of wanting to drink or wanting to smoke marijuana.
But you have to deal with it's the reality of what my life was like. And if I was, stoned for, 24 years or something, like, obviously it had a pull on me, and to not acknowledge that wouldn't necessarily be honest. I also said that my life is a million times better now than it was smoking weed or doing heroin or pills or whatever, that my life now is way more fun and exciting than it was then. I said that, I just said that I liked smoking weed, and that with weed legalization, maybe it triggers me a tiny bit, but not to the point of actually doing it. But I think it's important just to put it out there, and I think that that's something that the listeners have in common. And you don't have that in common with the listeners.
No. I mean, when Aurora was talking, I almost thought, I guess you go find a bar somewhere, but of course I didn't. I mean, I don't do that.
What did Aurora say? She said she wanted to smoke cigarettes and drink chilled red wine. That was appealing to you?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I don't want to smoke cigarettes. Chilled red wine is okay. I mean, that's not a problem. But listen, it turns out there's some people that do smoke marijuana, and obviously, and they have decent lives, et cetera, et cetera. It's just people that can't handle it. That's a major problem, a big problem, and that's the horror about addiction.
I'm really happy that you're such an expert about this stuff, and I think
You see, again, again, you're making up these. First of all, now tell me about what's this thing about DopeyCon? What is that all about? That I'm not allowed to go to it. Also,
just relax. Hold on for a second before we go there. I don't want to talk about your concerns about me triggering the Dopey Nation. Dopey Nation, if you feel triggered by the last, yes, there were a few comments that were like on the borderline that we were triggering, but like, come on, it's like life is life, and you got to get through it. And DopeyCon, it looks like it's happening. It looks like DopeyCon is coming actually to your neighborhood, Dad, the first weekend in October. Probably. But before we talk about DopeyCon, and I'm going to get you off the show in a second, I have to say that next week is the 200th episode of Dopey. Does that excite you, Dad?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yes.
For the last...
Yeah, and
what?
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What are you going to say?
I was going to say, the iTunes are back, right? The reviews are back. Everything seems to be going strong on that.
Well, I mean, there's been a few reviews since then, but Dopey Nation, just make my dad happy and put reviews on iTunes, right, Dad?
Yeah, it was a terrible 2 weeks when they took it off. It was just awful. You have to regain your prominence on the iTunes.
Oh, yeah, Dad, tell them about your problem with the iTunes.
Well, for week after week after week, if you typed in drug recovery, Dopey would come up all 10 in a row.
All 10.
Dopey. All 10.
And now?
And now this Omar guy has 2, and you have 8.
So we have 8 out of 10, and you're criticizing.
2 days ago.
If we don't have all 10, you got problems. You're saying we need to have 10 out of 10.
Absolutely, and you can see that the Dopey episodes that were listed in the top 10 weren't the recent one. Wasn't 198 and 197. In other words, that was when they weren't able to see it.
This is you trying to read the iTunes tea leaves like you have any idea of what they're doing, right?
I have no clue what they're doing.
The question I have for you, Dad, is do you think that Omar's father is yelling at Omar, this Dopey character has 8 out of the 10 drug rehab things and you should get more? Do you think that's happening to Omar right now?
I doubt it. Yes. No, I doubt it. I'm a very interested father.
I'll tell you, I listened to...
I'm involved.
I listened to David Sedaris, right? You know David Sedaris?
Oh, I heard him on the radio. Yeah, I just heard him on the radio. Yeah.
David Sedaris is this brilliant writer, and he writes a lot about his father. And he says that when he does a concert, his father goes to the concert, and David Sedaris will sell out these huge amphitheaters. And his father, who I think his name is Lou Sedaris, will go to the concert and count the number of empty seats. And then after the show, he'll say, David, I thought this was sold out, but there are 30 empty seats. And it kind of reminds me of this with you, with that 2 spots were not mine on the drug whatever thing.
Listen, it turns out that on the radio that I did hear this guy's name, David Sedaris. His father is 96 now and in a nursing home in North Carolina and not doing so well.
And still nudging and still nudging poor David.
He's not counting empty seats anymore.
All right. Well, he lived a nice life, Lou Sedaris, and our hopes and best wishes go out to Lou Sedaris. But the point of the thing is that I didn't get to say is that next episode is the 200th episode, which coincides with Chris's birthday. So we call it Christmas. The first Dopey holiday is Christmas because we miss Chris. And I want you guys to send in very short 200 episode Christmas submissions. You guys did it for the 100th episode. I'm talking about like between 5 seconds and 30 seconds. Just a nice Christmas wish or a happy 200th episode so we can play a bunch of them on the show. Doesn't that sound nice, Dad?
Yeah, that sounds terrific.
You like to hear all these the messages from the Dopey Nation. What's your favorite part of the show, Dad? What do you like?
I like the reviews. I like the voicemails. I like when they send in information, and I like to hear that they're being helped.
True or false? Your favorite part of the show is when they say they like you.
False.
All right. Well, you know who's coming on next? A guy I went to high school with. And you don't even know him. He was a year younger than me. He wound up as a heroin addict, and now he works in a methadone clinic. His name is Jesse, so check it out. He's from...
Do you want me to stay on the phone, or can I go to sleep?
You can go to sleep. Here's Jesse. Thank you, Dad.
All right. Good night, and good night to Dopey Nation.
Okay. So, very exciting guest, exciting to me. I think I say every guest is an exciting guest. But this is a very exciting guest to me. He's been on the show before. His name is Jesse. Him and I have actually been in each other's lives for a long time. We went to high school together, but we weren't particularly friends. So welcome back to the show, Jesse.
Thanks, man. We like kind of ran like in very like close circles, but I don't think we intersected a lot.
No,
so.
But I remember I would say hello to you. But the craziest thing is that I felt like when Chris and I started making the show, it always felt like nobody listened or whatever. It just felt like that. And we would hear from people, but they would be strangers, so they might as well not have actually existed. And then I got an email from Jesse, and I think Chris read it first, and then I saw it, and Jesse figured out that we had gone to the same high school because of this game that we played, right?
Yeah, with that Killer, yeah.
And tell him about Killer.
So, it was like... I just remember you organized into teams, and you had those little plastic guns that shot those like discs, those little plastic discs.
Yes.
And you had to you were assigned other teams you had to kill, but it couldn't happen on school grounds. But people got really insane about it. Like 2 girls from the school, I remember, showed up at my house on like a Saturday morning in Queens and told my mother that their car had broken down and could they come in and use her phone. This is like obviously in the days before cell phones. And like, I remember like sitting at the breakfast like table in the kitchen in like my boxers, and like 2 girls from high school like walk into the kitchen and just like gun me down with plastic discs.
I love that. That's great.
What the fuck? My mother was like, what the fuck is going on?
That happened to Jim. Jim was like taking a shit in his mother's house, and Brian, Big Brian, the rankster, showed up at Jim's house and was close with Jim's mom. Jim's mom let him in. Brian goes to the back of the house, finds Jim on the toilet, and just blasts him. And Jim didn't want to talk to Brian again. Jim just recently, 20 years later, forgave Brian for this. And just
he got him like fucking John Travolta and fucking Pulp Fiction style.
Exactly. I mean, so what we're talking about, this game that we played in high school, I mean, I thought it was literally one of the best experiences I had in my life. And basically all of New York City is inbounds. The only place that's not inbounds, like Jesse said, was the block of our high school. You played 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I think it was for 2 weeks, except the only time you were free was when school was on lunch. So you could travel freely at lunchtime, but any other hour of any other day, anywhere that wasn't on our high school block, you could be gunned down unceremoniously. And I remember, my favorite thing, I remember there's this dude from Queens, Alan, and I knew he took the E train. So I waited at 51st Street behind a pillar, and I just waited. And then I saw him, and I jumped out and I shot him in the face. And it was the most satisfying thing that's ever. I mean, I have 2 kids. I have a nice life, but shooting Alan in the face on 51st Street was the greatest thing.
That still might be the crowning achievement.
It was so satisfying, And then I remember one day there were all these, and like what Jesse said is a round robin of teams, and you're against both teams on either side of the circle, if that makes sense. And when a team gets eliminated, you play the next team. And I remember our team was dying, and I was at school, and I managed to sneak away, and all these people were waiting for me, and I managed to sneak away. And then when I got home, I lived in Chelsea at my dad's house on the 21st floor. And when the elevator opened up at the 21st floor, there were 4 guys standing on my dad's floor blasting me in the elevator. Okay. And I was so upset, right? And I ran into the house, right? And I was like, fuck you guys, you know? And I ran into the house and I closed the door and I called up Robbie to tell him to come to wait for them downstairs to kill them. And I invited them in and I gave them food and stuff. And I tried to get someone to come and kill them, but it didn't work.
Yeah, it was like, well, that was, I think, one of the biggest, I mean, it ties into like what made our high school awesome was that kind of like Manhattan became like your playground, you know, going to that school. And it was like the kind of the amount of freedom from like middle school on, you know, you were just riding the subway, running around Central Park, you know. I mean, I just remember like, if the school had a dance, it meant you all met there and then went to Central Park and like lit up a Duraflame log and smoked joints and drank 40s and
wine coolers. I drank wine coolers at the dances. But let me ask you this.
Yeah, in those days you could do that. Like nobody, like cops would walk right past you and they didn't give a shit.
No,
you know?
Yeah, no.
It was a very different time in New York City then.
If anything, we were just at risk of getting beaten up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like we were in the park, we were in, you know, uptown past 97th Street on the east side, which could be dangerous at that point. It was dangerous, you know, all the time. Like people like targeted we went to this very nerdy school and we were targeted by like weird gangs. Like the Decepticons, man.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that?
And like it was the height of like I remember showing up in the morning in the schoolyard and the janitor sweeping all like that was back when crack came in the glass vials still, and he'd be sweeping all the crack vials out of the schoolyard because people would like use it. I guess it was kind of enclosed, and they'd use the schoolyard to smoke crack at night.
Well, here's the question. I mean, I know that when I played Killer, I was not getting high. You know, I started playing Killer when I was in 10th grade, and I played through senior year, and I think that when we played Killer, like I started smoking pot at the end of senior year kind of thing, but you had a much different trajectory, right?
Oh, I mean, I think I was smoking weed and drinking probably by like sophomore year of high school, I think, but not like heavily, you know. It was pretty innocent, I think, at that point anyway. By senior year there was a lot, you know, but nothing beyond, you know, the recreational shit, you know. It was still pretty tame.
Well, to kind of spell out the thing, you know, I always never know how to build these kinds of stories properly, but Jesse just celebrated 10 years clean of heroin. So congratulations.
Thanks. 10 years sober. It's fucking crazy.
Clean and sober, fucking 10 years, which is something to be very, very proud of. If Chris was here, he would be banging the vape against the desk.
That's right.
And I would be clapping instead of holding a speaker in my hand.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks. It's, you know, I don't know if by celebrated you mean like ate a pint of ice cream and watched 3 episodes of Deadwood or something. That's about what the celebration consisted of. But,
wait, did you eat what kind of ice cream? You ate a pint of ice cream. What did you eat?
I think it was Cherry Garcia.
Well, there you go.
That's still my go-to.
That sounds like celebration
really
to me.
hard.
But what I really want to know is how did it go? I think you were on the show a long time ago, and Chris and I were actually in the Hamptons when you were on the show.
That's right.
And I remember you told a little bit about the story of how you went from innocent drinking and weed smoking to total oblivion and fucking your life up. But why don't you do a crash course for anybody that didn't hear you?
Yeah, I mean, it was a while ago. It was probably one of the earlier episodes.
Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, in high school, it was pretty tame. I mean, it was pretty much usual kind of partying shit. And then beginning of college, I went to upstate New York up in Albany, and that was pretty much just like there wasn't a lot to do. If you've ever been to Albany, it's pretty much like a wintry hellhole where you just drink and do drugs. At least that's what I did there, you know. And I mean, it was so textbook. It went from like, you know, the drinking of the pot to a lot of acid. And then it was sometime freshman year where somebody like came to me with, like, we were kind of on this mission, like wanted to just try everything we could get our hands on. You know, it was just a total garbage head. And someone came to me with like the prospect of like a heroin connection. And I remember being kind of like, I don't know, you know, like being kind of thrown by it at first. And then just being like, fuck it, you know, I'll try anything once, you know.
Do you remember that night? Like what happened that night?
I do. It was this chick her name was Abby. I might have talked about this the first time, but everyone just called her Abby. We called her Abby the Junkie.
Okay.
I would, it's probably a 50-50 shot of her still being alive. I mean, she was, you know, pretty hardcore already at that point, you know, and she picked up for us, and you know, she picked up like one bag for me and my friend to split. And I just remember we each snorted half a bag. And, you know, I mean, these were our virgin opioid receptors, like sucking that stuff up. So I remember getting nicely high, you know, and just, I remember feeling like this is like, you know, I've been trying like all the drugs, and it's like, you know, try the rest. Now you can try the best kind of thing. I was like, this is what I've been looking for. And then like, and just being like, it was perfect. You know, I hear other stories about people using and throwing up, and maybe it was that I only used a little. Maybe it was that I only snorted half a bag, and like.
It was just you and Abby the Junkie on the first bag?
No, it was me and her and my friend Mike, who I'm still friends with, and who's you know, who's not sober, but he's not afflicted, you know. And we're still, you know, we still talk to this day. But so it was the three of us, and you know, she was shooting it, but we were, you know, and that was like probably the only, and maybe one of like 2 times in my life I ever sniffed dope. Was that
really
that night. The very next day we were like, so we need more, you know, let's get more. And she used to score down in Alphabet City, so I rode a bus with her down to Alphabet City, and she showed me like where she would score down on, like, it was like Avenue C and like 7th Street or something at that point,
right?
And so like, bang, right there. Now I already knew how and where to cop. And from then on, it was like, then that night she showed me how to shoot up.
Wow.
And
so the second night you were shooting up, that was it.
Yeah. I went like straight from like that first snip to like shooting up the next night. And then I want to say it was like a couple weeks later, she showed up at my dorm room and was like, a buddy of hers, like some kid, friend of hers, had overdosed. And she was convinced that the cops were after her because she had given him the dope. And so she had like a whole bunch of bundles of dope. And she was like, can I keep these here? You can do as much as you want.
Wow.
And I was like, yeah, sure, of course.
Even now, like I'm coming up on 4 years clean, and I haven't done heroin in probably 7 or 8 bags. But hearing that some girl was like, let me leave a few bundles in your room, it sounds like an opportunity to me now. You know what I mean? And it's like that's how
I can
fucked
tell you
up.
That never happened again.
Right. Of course. It doesn't happen. I mean,
no.
I remember I had dealers who would like have me, like I was part of like a Methodonian dope co-op where one of us would buy all the dope and then parcel it out, and every kind of week it would change. And they like, once somebody fronted me like, I don't know, like I want to say like 5 bundles. And I just like, I think the guy got locked up or something. And I just didn't call him, and he never came back. You know, it's like just weird, like when there's dope on hand and I don't know, it happens once in a while, especially when you're around.
Every so often the universe just throws you something.
Throws you the end of your life, you know. So how long did it take, because you're a kid, you know, you're in college, how long did it take for this to turn into like a real habit?
It was like almost instantaneous. Like by the time I got through those bundles, and I had already been using for a couple of weeks. So at this point I was like, I remember like my first dope sick was like the last night of being up there, and like everyone in, like, I was in one of those like dorm suites, and everybody else had already moved out, and my mother was coming up to pick me up the next day. And I was like trying to pack, and I had run out of dope, and I was like, it was that experience where like the first time I was ever like dope sick. And I was like, I mean, I just remember it was like, that emptiness and just the physical awfulness. And like a couple people came to visit me, like friends stopped by and were like, just couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with me, and
because you didn't tell them.
Yeah. I mean, I think some people, well, one of the funny things is like, I remember in the beginning when I started, like not being as aware as like I probably should have been of like, most people aren't cool with like, I remember telling people like, oh, I found this new, like I started trying heroin and it's awesome. You should try it. And people would be like, you out of your fucking mind. Like I just didn't like, I took it really lightly and didn't like, like when I got home for that summer, I was still using, one of the first things I did was take the train into Manhattan and score, and I remember trying to get like, friends from Hunter to like use with me, and like they were like, no fucking way. Well,
of course,
which is crazy because a lot of those same people, like one of them's dead now from an overdose, and most of them ended up using at one point or another.
Yeah, I had convinced a bunch of my friends from high school to try it, and they all did it like once, except Jeremy. Jeremy did a ton of it, but he wound up not getting addicted, and it makes me think of this thing. I know that like when I had found it, I had the exact same reaction, which was, this is going to solve my problems. I'm going to feel the way I want to feel, like the now I have arrived kind of moment. And but the other thing I thought was like I was trying to say before, Jesse and I went to this very, very nerdy school. And, like, people don't do heroin in the school we went to. And did you realize, like, you were going down a path that was not... I mean, I started at that school when I was 4 years old. And, like, a bunch of us in that school were just idiots who managed to, like, manipulate the school into letting us stay and stuff. But Jesse got in 7th grade when you actually have to be smart. So you were like a really smart kid. Like, were you reflecting on like how like what was happening, like the difference in your life? What was that experience like?
I think a little bit. I don't think it hit me right away. I think it started to hit me when things started to get bad, and like things, things got bad quick. Like I was, I was in rehab by the time I was, 18.
Okay.
Like that, by the end of that summer, back from freshman year, I was in some like, some bullshit outpatient program. Like, people figured out what was going on, but I just kept using, on and off, probably until I was like 21, I think. I ended up like, because I started getting caught a lot. It was when Giuliani got elected and like just started arresting everybody. And it was like, it used to be such a beautiful experience. Like going down to the Lower East Side and copping and like going to one of the little Polish places and using, and I'd eat a plate of pierogies. And
right.
Like, it just felt like I had this charmed existence.
You're living the life. And, you're living like a life that's in a book, basically.
Yeah. And I definitely romanticized it. I mean, in the lamest, like stupidest way, like reading fucking Burroughs and like thinking there was some sort of like deep edginess to what I was doing, and writing in journals and all the stupid shit. That,
well, I mean, like it was stupid because the cost was so much greater than you had imagined. It was edgy, it was beautiful, but it also was like toppling your whole fucking world. It was all of those things.
You're right. I mean, I'm sure the writing was pretty atrocious. You know, I don't think I have any of those journals anymore.
But meanwhile, you have some book, Jesse. You have some book in your mom's house or your dad's house, and if you got your hands on it and you sent it into fucking, Little Black Press or something, you have the fucking next junkie on your hands. You don't even realize that what you have there. No, it's not possible.
Some fucking like 18-year-old junkies scribblings.
See, I think you're too hard on yourself. I think you probably have something there. I mean, I'm being stupid right now, but I have a feeling like I think you're very hard on yourself. No,
that's true. And part of it is, there's also, I mean, there was definitely, like, there's an undeniable beauty about being young and high and bulletproof, and back then you were shooting actual dope and it wasn't all fucked up with fentanyl, which is just, the fentanyl's just killing people left and right.
Well, the dope was killing people too, though. People would get their hands on a good batch and it would kill them. It's just way less, way less.
Yeah.
Now, before we go down some road of serious junkie glorification, when did it get really bad? Like, what was the really bad part?
Well, yeah, I mean, getting arrested and spending nights in, dope sick in the tombs underneath, down under the courthouses was pretty fucking awful. I ended up kind of like disconnecting from my family for about a year, and I moved back upstate New York to like couch surf amongst people that I knew who were like still in college, but I was just their junkie friends who was now like staying on their couch and kind of like, didn't fully understand like, how out of place I was, and it was, I mean, everybody had those people around, like I think every like house full of college kids at one point or another had some junkie dude staying on their
Yeah, and you're like, I don't want to be like that guy.
Yeah, and I was that guy. I mean, I didn't have, I couldn't fucking hold a job, and I looked like shit. And, the weird thing was that I kind of got it together a little, I kind of hit a wall and a bottom, a mini bottom, like the last time I got locked up. I never did anything, it was all just like little misdemeanor tickets in Manhattan. And, so I never like ended up doing time or anything. But I just kind of like hit a breaking point where I was able to stop for a while. But I didn't get sober. I just stopped doing dope.
And you drank and stuff after that?
And then I just drank. And like, I honestly, like, part of the worst period of my life was like, I became a really bad alcoholic. Most of my 20s were spent embarrassing myself with alcohol. It was really, like my alcohol bottoms were really as bad as any of my dope bottoms.
It sounds like they might have been worse.
In a lot of ways they are. I think, alcohol is like, dope took me to low places and horrible misery, but like alcohol, you just debase yourself. Like, I have so many regrets and like embarrassments and just like things I'd love to take back or like go back in time and reverse that all stem from alcohol,
Right.
I was just, I was a really good drinker until I wasn't, and then I seemed to get worse and worse at it. And, I was never good at stopping, but.
Right. What's interesting to me is you're 44 now, I'm assuming, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you got clean when you were 34, and I think Chris died when he was just about to turn 34. So what was it that made you turn a corner at that point? Like, what was the final frontier of using or drinking or whatever, or where you were at? Like, what was it?
Well, the first, like, sometime right after I turned 30, I ended up, without, it was all just basically booze and Coke, and I was just bottoming out with that, just drinking around the clock and, just living just a shit life. I think I had moved back in with my parents at that point. just really just miserable. And I think it was probably, it was like maybe I must have been 30, because I remember I was still drinking on my 30th birthday, but it wasn't that long after that. I ended up like in some sort of like blackout state. I basically attempted suicide seriously enough that they ended up locking me up in a
What did you do?
Ward in Brooklyn. What's that?
What did you do?
I sliced my wrists open. I still have really ugly scars from it. And I did it like, the proper way.
Right.
But thankfully it didn't take.
Yeah.
I just remember being so empty inside, like it dried up. Like I remember passing out sort of. I remember waking up and being disappointed that it didn't work,
Yeah.
And my friend, I was at a friend's house and left like their living room rug completely soaked in blood. I was like supposed to be crashing on their couch. And like all I said when they like woke me up and were like taking me to the hospital was like, oh, I guess that's why people do it in the bathtub. Like
right.
That was all I could think about was like, why did it clot up? Like, why didn't I bleed out?
Right. And who found you?
It was a friend of mine. At a friend's house, and he lived with his girlfriend. I think his fucking poor girlfriend found me.
She's in therapy right now saying, and I found
she's
this
a
guy.
Psychiatrist, actually. So.
Right. So maybe you were the turning point in her life as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, I was, and so that I ended up like in a psych ward, and they pretty quickly determined that I was an alcoholic. And so they refused to let me go unless they were sending me directly to a treatment, place. And I actually ended up going right from there to Mountainside.
Oh my God, I forgot about that.
Yeah.
I forgot about that crazy coincidence.
I mean, it's a pretty awesome experience. It's like, it's the rehab like most people kind of wish they could go to. This was like 2005, 2006, I guess. I'm trying to think.
Mountainside is super up in Dopey's business right now, and it looks like Mountainside is going to be the home of the first Dopey Con. So you saying how good Mountainside is a real boon for the show.
There you go, and I can vouch that I have had no coaching on that.
That's funny. That's so random.
Yeah, no, I have no affiliation. Except that I went there twice.
Right.
They have a bunch of my money, but other than that, and it was, it's like, it looks like they really souped the place up. It wasn't quite as fancy back then. But it was my first experience ever it was the first meeting I ever went to was there. And it was like, I still remember walking into that big room for like the Friday night. It was a Friday, and they had that big Friday night meeting.
Yeah, like the town
huge AA meeting they had. Yeah. And I was still wearing the same pants that were soaked in blood from when I friggin', tried to. And I was just like, I had this huge bandage on my arm, and I looked like a fucking. I can't even imagine what I looked like.
I think you can imagine it. I mean, considering.
Yeah. I just remember like people kind of looking at me and like giving me that like reassuring, like it gets better look.
And it's also like that look of you're definitely in the right place. You're definitely in the right place look.
I'd spent 5 days in detox, and the antidepressants were kicking in, and like I felt good. Like, it had been like I hadn't gone 5 days without drinking probably since I was like 20,
Right.
And it was it felt fucking great, and that was and it didn't stick. I went home, and I thought I would stay sober, but I did all the wrong. I picked up a girlfriend there and did that whole thing, and I ended up kind of back where I started, and ended up back there, and then.
Why do you think, Jess? Why do you think like? I know that like it's not the right thing to pick up the girlfriend in treatment, but like what a joyful thing that is to be all fucked up in treatment and somebody liking you, right? Is that
it's and you're like your emotions are all like coming back to you, and you guys have everything in the world in common because you're just going through exactly the same thing.
Because you're both as fucked as you can be, basically.
Yeah, in 2 months you realize you have nothing in common, but like at that moment, it's like it's glorious. I've never been so in love in my adult life.
Right. If they could bottle that shit, it's like it's just an amazing thing. The rehab romance, and then why is it so destructive?
I think it's like you don't know each other at all, and you're so friggin' raw. You have nothing to offer each other. Your lives are both a mess,
and you basically you count on the other person like you counted on drugs, basically.
Yeah, you instantly assign them like the position of your higher power. Whatever, instantly everything hinges on them. Like your whole day hinges on like seeing them in the morning at the breakfast thing. It's like forget it. It's all over once. And I made that mistake both times I went to Mountainside.
Well, but it's it's a glorious mistake. That's all I have to say about it. It's like you lived and you told the tale and like you got it's bullshit. It's like being a kid. It's like fucking waking up and you're like 12 years old, but you're an adult. You know what I mean? It's very odd.
Really is. Well, there's definitely an element of that to rehab, there's an element of feeling like you're back in high school because you have no responsibilities other than to like go to these groups and there's like activities for you.
Yeah, you're like making friends and playing volleyball and shit.
People are feeding you and like you go outside and smoke a cigarette. It's just, it feels like you do feel like a kid again.
And also you get to meet, I liked the fact that you're like stuck with these people that you never would have spoken to otherwise. I always got a kick out of that. And everyone always made fun of me for it. But it also was like what you said about you don't have to do anything. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You're stuck in this place and nothing is expected of you besides eating, waking up, and walking around. And I liked my life stopping. Like that's why I think I liked rehab because of that. Like, I love being free now, and I love working hard. I love supporting my family, but I would love my life to stop for 28 glorious days.
I would love to go to rehab right now.
Right?
It'd be fucking, oh my God, I'd give anything to like go spend a month at Mountainside.
That's so funny. That's so
And not
funny.
only is nothing expected of you, but you like if you just do like and what they ask and like share in groups, you're a fucking all-star. Like,
right.
You get pats on the back. You get like
good boy, good dog.
Yeah.
Have another piece of cake.
For doing nothing, just for not fucking up.
Right. That's so funny. Oh my God. And then like, so how like before all that happened, when you like you didn't wind up bottoming out on dope at all. You bottomed out on alcohol.
I did. I actually, well, after that, I ended up coming back to dope. Because basically what happened was I ended up moving from there I ended up in New Haven at a sober house because they had kind of a little channel to like these sober houses in New Haven. And I was like, well, I should not go back to New York City because that's been a problem for me. And like, I went and moved into some sober house in New Haven and I did I was sober about 1.5 years probably, and I was going to meetings and I was working in fucking Starbucks at night and just, doing my thing. And I was working in the Yale library during the day and then I don't know, it just didn't fucking work that time for me. I started drinking and smoking crack because that was what was around, I remember the first night going back, I bought a bottle of vodka, and just started kind of drinking enough to get my courage up. And then I got on my bicycle to ride into the hood. And within like 25 minutes, I was in a crack house, like smoking crack. And I ended up spending like the better part of the next year in this fucking crack house. And that's when like, the dope came back around, I don't know, a few months in. Of course, like...
Do you remember any specific experiences in the crack house? Like...
Oh, It was like, that's the shit on that. Like, the guy who ran it, or I don't know, it wasn't even like it was like a fucking tiny little apartment that was like, you know, probably some Section 8, like basically like rooming house apartment that this old guy, Winnie, I don't know, I guess it was his, but there was always like the same 5 people there. And he was like this old kind of like, he walked with a cane. He had these like really nasty dreads, like, and he was always trying to fuck me. He was he was like always trying to like, because he always had tons of crack, and he was like always trying to like, you know. And I was, by the time I had a bad dope habit, like I didn't have a lot of money for crack, you know.
And you were always very handsome, Jesse. So you can't really blame him.
He was always he always wanted to suck my dick for crack. And like, it's actually the funny, it was actually something I was thinking of when I knew I was going to talk to you tonight, was the compromise I came up with was I had like a flip phone with a camera, and I took a picture of my dick, right, and I would let him see it if he would give me hits of crack.
Wow.
Like every once in a while he'd be like, Jason, let me see
the dick.
I gotta see that white dick.
Wow.
And I'll break one off for you. So I'd like show him this fucking picture on my flip phone, and he'd give me crack. Fucking, and yeah, and that's where like, so that, yeah, and a guy started coming around with dope, and there was always like, you know, a go-between that would go get it for me. And then eventually I, you know, managed to like create my own connections. And I don't know, the next thing you know, it was like 9 months later, and I was 50 pounds lighter, and, you know, waiting outside a public detox, you know, like a state detox.
Yeah. The reason I was asking that is because I was curious if methadone was ever part of your story when you were using.
You know, it wasn't. I mean, other than like buying bottles of methadone, you know, I never went on a program to try and get clean. I remember when I went to detox, they were trying to get me to go on, because they had a program through the detox there, and they were like, you know, we can put you on a methadone program. And I was like, no, I want to go back to meetings. I know someone with a sober house that'll let me move in. And I just remember them looking at me like, dude, this kid's going to die. This kid's got no chance.
But that's how you did it, right? You wound up doing it through meetings and just like that, right?
I did. I mean, listen, I don't, like, it was bad. I mean, I did like a 5-day detox, and then spent the next month, you know, in that brutal, like, post-acute fucking withdrawal, like, just sleeping maybe an hour and a half at a time.
Yeah.
You know, it just, and it was like mid-July. It was so fucking hot. And like, I was in this ghetto sober house with no air conditioning. And I remember just like tossing in the fucking gross bed. And, oh, it was fucking horrible. That's like one of those things that definitely like puts me, but whenever I lose whatever fucking gratitude I do have, it's like I look back on that, and it definitely puts things in perspective.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I brought it up, and it's like I've been meaning to get Jesse to come back on forever. I didn't want to have him on the phone. I wanted to meet him in Manhattan, but you live in Westchester, right?
I'm in Connecticut.
Oh yeah, he's in Connecticut, and I'm on Long Island, and unless we take a ferry, and we both work crazy hours, we both have kids, and it's like we had to do it like this. But the reason that I was just chomping at the bit to get you back on, besides the obvious reasons, was because there was a lot of talk about medicated assisted treatment and my stupid take on it. And Jesse has been working in a methadone clinic for how many years?
It's coming up on 6 years now, I think. Yeah, it's over 5 years. I started there as an intern through my school program, and then was hired on. So yeah, it's been almost 6 years I've been a counselor.
You've been almost on methadone. You've been on methadone without drinking any for 6 years.
I've been spending all of my weekdays in a methadone clinic pretty much for the past 5 years.
And I honestly think like that's one of the reasons that you're so in touch with what it was like to be in post-acute withdrawal. You know, like
definitely.
I don't even think about it. You bringing it up, me seeing people in the street, me hearing from people on Dopey, me going to meetings, I can reflect on it. But like you're fucking in the shit. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing it on a daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
and
it's
let's talk, you know, a little, you know, I had promised there was some fucking listener guy, I think his name was Patrick. I think he's given up the show, frankly, because I said I was going to have I was going to have you on. I was going to have like an expert on, and instead I wound up having like Hannah, who was coming off methadone and like, you know, and she was doing dope, and I had her on instead of you. So why don't we talk a little bit about the ups and downs of medicated assisted treatment, like via methadone or Suboxone, just a little bit. I don't want to put anybody to sleep out there, but like you are an expert. I was on methadone for, you know, somewhere between 4 and 8 years. I can't really keep track because I was on methadone and pills and stuff. But when I was on methadone, I did not get on methadone to really clean up. I got on methadone because I couldn't afford dope, and I didn't want to stop doing dope. I wanted to like keep my addiction alive because I didn't want to stop using, and I couldn't afford copping every day. And then I wound up copping every day anyway, but just a little bit so I would feel something, and then I would drink my dose. So for me, methadone became this, you know, a kind of like shackle to a methadone clinic, you know, to a life. And I was terrified of going away from it. You know what I mean? Like I was terrified of not getting my take homes. I was terrified of not being able, just whatever, like having a nightmare of forgetting to go and finding myself sick, like in some crazy, weird Black Mirror surreal scenario where like it's 3:00 and I didn't get my methadone and I start feeling it, you know? So what's your, I mean, like, obviously you see people that run the gamut, which is why there is no real answer to the question of medication.
Absolutely. I mean, that's like when you said the ups and downs of that's, I mean, it runs the full spectrum. I mean, I can think of at least 20 clients off the rip that that are exactly how you described yourself, that they show up in order to, like, if they don't have enough money for enough dope in order to not be sick, you know, they're taking benzos, they're doing their thing. But I've seen those guys turn it around too. You know, I've seen those guys like get to a point, you know, but then I have the other end of the spectrum is, you know, like, I don't know, we have a lot of blue collar guys that are making good money that are completely clean, that, you know, are coming in for every 2 weeks, picking up their bottles, doing their thing, tapering their dose, you know, strong recovery. We have guys that are super active in AA that are on, you know, that are on low doses of methadone. And the sad thing is they can't tell anybody about that because they know they'd be judged.
Right. People would be like, you're not clean, whatever.
Yeah. And I have friends from AA who'd still be alive today if they'd given it a shot. You know, I can't say for sure, but I can say that they would have had a better chance, you know. It wasn't for me, you know, which is something that, you know, I feel I'm lucky in that regard. I didn't get to a point where I had to go there. You know, if I hadn't had certain supports, if I hadn't had parents that were willing to front the first few weeks of rent at a sober house, you know, if I hadn't had certain things go right in my life, I might have ended up there, and maybe I would have needed it. And it might have been the only thing that kept me alive until I was ready, you know, to get to where I needed to be. I mean, even with you, who knows? If you hadn't been on it for those years, what might have happened to you?
Well, that's what Chris always said about it. Like, whenever I used to be kind of naively against it, because when I was on it, I was so not clean, Chris would always say, well, you don't know that you wouldn't have gotten clean if you hadn't have done the medicated assisted treatment when you did it. The question I have is like these kind of guys who are on low doses, do they pine to be off of it? Are they just like, I wish I could just get off though?
There's such a spectrum. Like I've worked with guys because the clinic I'm at's been around a long time. We have clients that have been on since like the late 80s, and some of them, a guy who's in his mid 60s and has been on 50 milligrams of methadone for the past 30 years. It's like, why the hell am I going to put my body through coming off of this?
Right.
I come in once every 2 weeks. I pick up my medication. It's not that much different from having a fucking prescription. The funny thing with opiates, and methadone is just a synthetic opiate. There's a lot of bullshit mythology around it about, eating away bones and stuff like that. But it's just a fucking long-acting opiate. And opiates...
Wait, hold up. Yeah. It doesn't eat away your bones?
It does not.
I remember when I was kicking methadone, I had this thing with my knee, and like I would hear this clicking in my knee, like the joint clicking, and all of the old Methadonians would be like, "Yeah, man, that's that methadone getting in your joints." and I decided that my knee still clicks, and I'm still like, "Man, it's that methadone." That methadone.
Ate it away. No, it people just don't fucking take care of themselves, and they don't eat right for years and years and years, and they're probably walking around on a leg that's all fucked up, and then when they stop taking methadone, all of a sudden all that pain surfaces. But opiates, aside from the fact that they'll kill you easily with an overdose, and they are super super addictive, are fairly low. I mean, they don't impact the body the way alcohol does or cocaine does, or even like they're easier on your liver than Tylenol. People who are long-term like Percocet abusers end up with fucked up livers
because of the acetaminophen, right.
Yeah, so it's like as a medication. Listen, it ain't perfect.
Right.
There's obviously from personal experience. I mean, and I've certainly taken plenty of it. I mean, it's an opiate, but I think
I get it. I get what you're saying.
When someone's doing it right. When someone's really doing it right, it's fucking great. Like I see guys that are just like, and guys and girls that have just like their whole fucking life has turned around and they have a shot. And it's like, what kills me is when people got to put that down, and I hear about it from clients all the time that they were going to meetings and then they had a sponsor and they told their sponsor they were on methadone and they got called out in a meeting or or they were told that they couldn't share. And it's just like, where the fuck do people get off? And the guy who's telling them that they're not sober is some old fuck usually who's never even touched opiates and is, just drank 8 cups of coffee and is smoking cigarettes and, it's like... Right.
It's his trip. It's his fucking decision, how he perceives it. But the real question is, Jess, let's say you're one of these dudes, right? And you're on some kind of, maintenance dose of methadone and you're in AA and you don't tell anybody because you don't want to get judged, but then you're also not working a totally honest program.
The rigorous honesty thing.
It's fucked up. It's like no man's land.
It's and I know it's got to eat away at people. I mean, I look at it, because I've had the conversation with clients, and you got to leave it up to them, and the way I look at it personally, if it was me, I would feel like it's nobody's fucking business. It's, you got people in AA that'll tell you you're not sober if you're on an antidepressant. So
what would you tell somebody who's like on a maintenance dose of methadone that's struggling, that wants to be in a 12-step group, but is worried about who they could tell? Who should they talk to? Somebody at the clinic? Somebody else who's on methadone working a program? Like, who do they talk to?
I think if you, kind of the same way I do, that when you go to meetings, it takes a while to figure out who's not full of shit,
sure.
and who you can talk to. And I think it's the kind of thing where, once you develop a circle of friends, and a fellowship of guys that you trust, I think only an individual person can know when the time is to share that kind of thing. But I think it needs to be shared, because I think people are dying like crazy. And I think people need to, the stigma isn't going to go away until people start realizing how many people are on it. There's so many clients I have that I'm like, dude, I wish I could tell, I wish I could tell people you're on methadone.
So they could be the poster boy.
To hold you up as an example of here's a dude who's supporting his family, lives a super virtuous, productive life, is on methadone, and you would never fucking know it. You would never know it. And, it's just, people have a very fucked up perception. A lot of people don't understand opiate use to begin with, I mean, most people even abusing opiates are not most of them are trying to use enough to that'll allow them to go to work. They're not trying to nod out on a street corner.
Right.
Even when I was shooting dope, I was going to work every fucking day. I was never a sloppy junkie, I was I just wanted enough to feel good, not be sick, be able to go through my day. I mean, I was fucking.
You weren't seeking out the nod, though?
No, I wasn't into that. I wanted just that nice, easy, pleasurable feeling, and I liked that kind of way you just glide through your day with unlimited energy and
But that passes so fast, once you start doing it. I would seek out. I had little techniques to catch a nod. I would read comics to catch a nod, or I'd play guitar to catch a nod, or I would just do little things to try to basically not be conscious of where I was, and I have to say. Yeah, if you can it's all about quality of your life and where you are with yourself. If you feel good and you feel like your life is together and you're living a free, happy life, by all means, do whatever that entails. For me, I was not working an honest methadone program or anything. And when I finally, I was at 100 and I don't know, anywhere. I don't know what I was doing. I think the most I was on was 150 milligrams, and getting off was the greatest thing I ever did. It was just an accomplishment. And I knew that, huge accomplishment. Yeah. And when I got off of it, it was I just knew that I wasn't going to take it again, because if I did, I don't know that I could have gotten off of it again. But I did wind up back on pills and back on heroin, I just, I didn't want to go back to a clinic because I lived there. And I just felt a little bit in a bubble in a methadone clinic. And I don't think that I could have gotten clean that way. I don't know. I don't think it was for me. And I'm not saying that it's not for anybody. That's my experience. I just wanted you to share your professional experience and tell both sides of it, which I think you did. And
and I think, I feel all sides of it every day, at the clinic. And I see, my basic take is because clients will come to me all the time. I want to get off this shit. I don't want to be on it. And my job is not to keep anyone on methadone, but I just want to hear that they have another plan. If their plan is to keep shooting dope, I can't stop that. But if they're still using and they're fucking around and they're I just want to come off. I'm well, what's the fucking so you're just going to use more? You already can't afford what you're using now. So what's the my basic advice to anyone would be if it's working for you, don't let anyone fucking tell you that it's wrong, that there's anything wrong with it. And if it's not working for you, take an honest look at why it's not, it's really easy to people love to blame inanimate things. People like to blame AA when it doesn't work for them. People like to blame methadone when it doesn't work for them. But it's it's just like anything else. Own your fucking part and figure out what you got to do.
There it is. I think that's a beautiful message. And I'm glad you could come on, you know, and I'm glad we could celebrate your 10 years, and I'm glad you could tell the showing your dick to the crack dealer story. Like, did you tell that? I don't think you told that story when you were on last time.
No.
Chris would have Chris would have like eaten out on that story. Like, that story is like such a classic sort of Chris story. So I appreciate that. And I also just
appreciate it.
Definitely. And I also just appreciate like you being around. You know what I mean? I love it when we get to talk. And I see you as like a sort of like dopey fucking soldier out there in the fields, like knowing the deal, you know. And I love that, you know what I mean. And I love that we went to the same school, and like we have a very similar experience, and not many people have that experience. So I appreciate that. No,
I agree, man, and I really appreciate you having me on. And definitely the show's been like the show has definitely helped me, man. It's definitely, you know, there's times, man, where doing my job, being in recovery is not always easy, because I don't disclose at my job. My job, I take, you know, I work on like a clinical level, and I don't draw on my own experience outwardly. I don't tell clients you know, some of them know me, some of them recognize me, but they've been pretty good about, you know, keeping my shit under wraps. But like, you know, like, when I have clients that are like, "No, man, I don't want to go to that detox. That place is gross." And I'm like, I can't say like, "Dude, I went there. It's not that fucking."
It's not that bad.
You know? But so yeah, like this Dopey has helped me, like, I don't know, just kind of relive that. It's definitely it served to help me. I don't know, in my recovery. It's been there for me in a really kind of important way.
Well, who'd have thought that was possible, right? What a crazy thing that is, you know? And I think it's because it's so casual and still like very potent at the same time. That's my belief.
I think so.
Awesome, Jess. Thank you so much for coming on and being around. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Be well, all right?
Yeah, be in touch. You're going to come to DopeyCon? I think it's the first Saturday in October, 18th Street, I think.
I'll
Maybe
mark
not.
It down. That sounds awesome. I'm going to try and make it.
You have to come. You have to figure it out. But that, I mean, that's what we're thinking.
Definitely.
You have to. You have to be there. And Dopey Nation, it looks like it's going to be the first weekend in October. It looks like it's only going to be for like between 70 and 100 people. It's going to be in Manhattan. I'm not exactly sure where, but Jesse, you have to go.
Okay.
And the other thing, I'm just going to say this really quick, is it's going to be like a recorded Dopey episode, but what it's really going to be, it's like, you know, The Moth on NPR?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be like The Moth. It's going to be like between 5 and 10 people telling 5 and 10 minute stories around drugs, addiction, and dumb shit.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's going to be, and then there'll be questions and answers and stuff. So if you want to tell a story at DopeyCon, we are currently taking submissions. So send in a story between 5 and 10 minutes. You can write it or you can do a voicemail and tell me it's for DopeyCon. And we're going to select like 20 submissions, and then we're going to randomly pull people out of a hat so nobody like feels burned or anything when we're there. What do you think?
That sounds awesome. That's I didn't even realize that was kind of what was going on. I love that idea.
Well, what am I going to do? Talk for an hour? Nobody wants to hear that shit. You know, it's like when Regis and Kathy Lee, like,
that's perfect, because that's the spirit of the show. You know,
exactly. It should be about the stories, and it's like nobody wants to see like an interview in front of people. A conversation in front of people doesn't work. That's retarded. You know.
Yeah.
But I think the stories, it's like special, and that's what we're about. You know, that's what addicts are about in and out of recovery. It's like, and that's what Dopey was supposed to be about. So that's what.
Yeah.
That's the.
And that's we talked about rehab. I mean, you captured those early episodes. That's what they did for me. They took me back to sitting out in the smoking area at rehab, or in the sober house, just telling fucking stupid war stories. You know. And there's a joy in that, and there's definitely a healing factor in that. You know, it may not be, you know, the most sober thing in the world. It may not, you know, it may not. Some people may not approve, but it fucking, I don't know. Early in recovery, we need to get those stories out, and we need to laugh at them.
Exactly. It's another way to take away the whole stigma of shame and self-hatred and all that shit. You know, because it was funny. Even when it wasn't funny, it was funny that we can talk about it, as far as I'm concerned. You know? And that's going to be, you know, so DopeyCon. Look out. You better be there, Jesse, okay?
You got me.
All right, right on, man. Thanks again.
All right, man. Have a good night.
You too. Later. So that was Jesse. And it was great to have him on. I think that we covered a lot of fucking methadone business and, you know, just classic dopey, junkie business. Now, last week I said we were going to talk about the TV show Euphoria, and now we're going to talk about the TV show Euphoria. So I got on my favorite fucking TV film addict, alcoholic reviewer, Devin Faraci. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
It's my pleasure. And I wanted to get somebody with a little bit of brains to talk about this show, Euphoria.
Well, I'm sorry you were only able to get me. I apologize.
So I mean, what did you watch it? What'd you think?
I did. I watched it. I binged it. When you told me you wanted me to come talk about it, I had started watching it and then I fell off, and then I sat down and I binged the whole thing. You know, it's pretty good.
See, what I thought about Euphoria, the first thing I thought about it was like, it was just like insane. It was like 90210 on like the craziest drugs, on like ecstasy and like candy flipping while shooting fentanyl, 90210 kind of thing. And I thought it was like super, like, I don't know. At first I found it to be very like hot and like sex charged in a hot way. But by the end of it, I kind of felt like it was more like about trauma and scary like repercussions of terrible trauma, which is really a foray into addiction, I think.
Yeah, I think that the structure of the season really echoes the structure of addiction, right? I mean, like, where it's like, and even in the show they talk about it, like drugs and shit are really fun for a little while, and then it gets really ugly and it gets really unpleasant, and it starts bringing up really painful things and painful repetitive things. And so I think that structure really works for sort of what it's talking about. You know, I think also the other thing, though, is that the show is really at its heart, it's just a soap opera, right? I mean, like, it's like Riverdale, like, where's this crazy shit happening. That main storyline with the jock kid setting up that guy to take the fall for him beating his girlfriend. I mean, that's like such wild soap opera stuff. That is, but I think the show that does it well.
But that's why it was annoying, because they basically, like, in terms of visually and audio wise, they had this incredibly sophisticated thing going on where the music and the visuals were so hypnotic. And I think a lot of like the structure set it up. It opened the viewer up. It opened me up to the show, because I love that every show opened with an origin story. And I love that it was all of this new trippy music. I don't like new music, and I loved the new music that I heard on Euphoria, because it was just powerful, different music, and the visuals were insane, and the cinematography was beautiful. But that fucking thing with Nate setting up that kid and all that shit, what you think the show is going to outsmart itself and come from a different point of view, but they just let it happen and they never double back to it, which I thought was a failing.
Yeah, I mean, I understand what they're trying to do, which is that here's Nate, the white jock, who knows how to use the system to get what he wants. So it's like sort of metaphorical, but it's like so fucking on the nose, and it's also so soap opera-y and so silly and so over the top that it doesn't quite jibe as well with the rest of the stuff happening on the show. But I do think that the show is so cool looking. What it really reminds me of a lot is these old movies they used to make called hygiene films. And the idea was that they would show like a live birth, or they would show sex, or they would show people doing drugs. And it would be like kind of like crazy stuff to see. And they would present it under an educational banner. So like it would be like, you know, this is the birds and the bees, kids. And then that sort of thing mixed in with classic exploitation, reefer madness stuff, mixed in with soap operas, and then all mixed in with prestige TV. So it has that veneer of like, oh, this is important television that's about the kids today and what they're experiencing. But really, it's like super fucking exploitative and crazy and wild. And it does have good stuff to say, but it's all of those things at the same time, which I think is what I liked about it.
I liked it, you know, like I like to grade things and I would give it like a solid B, you know, and what it needed to flip itself on its head with that Nate story. You needed Fez to get, to get back at Nate. What's the word for that? Comeuppance is the word?
Comeuppance is the word, yeah.
You want Nate to get comeuppance, or Fez to get comeuppance, and you want Fez to do something. You want Fez to be able to show himself because that kid is such a good actor. I also think the acting in general was great. I think
Zendaya is incredible, man.
Huh? Oh, she was great, and I think her fear was fucking great. Like and I think her prudishness was great, and but I don't like all the very schmaltzy stuff, like the ending with that dance number. But the music was great. And then she relapses at the end. Spoiler. Sorry for the spoiler. But she relapses. And I'm comfortable with the relapse. I feel like the show was a little too vague all over the place. And the thing that made it from being the next level of a show, an A, an A-, a B+, was that it didn't connect the dots properly for me.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I mean, I think that I liked watching her struggle because I think seeing people struggle is really important. And the fact that she kept getting back up, even though she kept falling down, was really important. So I'm curious to see where season 2 picks up with her relapsing. But I do agree that I think it all came together to this one dance they had at the end, to the school dance. And I don't think it really all came together properly as a narrative in those final scenes. And I think that that's part of what they're trying to do. They're trying to say life isn't a convenient narrative that's going to have this guy walk into this gym and shoot this guy and end this story. But at the same time, it's also sort of a little frustrating because it is operating on a soap opera level.
Well,
so you do want some of that to happen.
But I understand your point. I have a friend, my friend Brad, all he wants to do is make sure TV shows aren't soap operas. But you have a good show like Breaking Bad or The Wire isn't a soap opera. And I think Euphoria could tread into that territory. They just needed to get a little bit smarter with structure and characters and have some characters do things that they weren't expecting them to do. Like Nate could have done stuff that you didn't expect him to do. He could have been different. He could have actually fallen for Jules in that situation.
Yeah, I was disappointed. I really wanted him to actually be falling for Jules. I mean, maybe he is. Maybe we'll see in season 2. But I really wanted to get more of a sense that he was legitimately struggling with a thing.
They're not showing that, though. But I do think that they did really show it felt like I watched the finale on the train coming home yesterday, and I kind of felt like I was tripping. Like when I got off the train, I felt like I was high. I felt totally altered. So I think they do a good job with that. And they do a really good job with portraying drug use, I think, which is very rare in TV and movies. But it felt like legit. Some of the drug scenes in the show and the way that people behave and act and the way they depict it felt very realistic to me. And I loved Kat. I loved Kat. I think the acting was really, really good. And I loved...
The acting is great. I think Jules is incredible. Kat is incredible.
I didn't realize that she was actually trans. It took 5 episodes, and it took my friend Sam telling me she was trans to know it. I didn't figure it out. I was fucking retarded. I didn't figure it out.
I think that's really incredible. And I think it's really great to sort of see more trans actors showing up because the more trans actors show up, the more trans actors we can have in other things. I mean, that's really cool. But Kat's incredible. I think that actress is a model. And I think she's amazing. She has so many of her scenes are herself alone, and she just does such a great job.
She was great. And I think, I think they go down roads and then they don't want to really go down the road, like with McKay and stuff, or the twins, or all that shit. But I thought for the most part, I think it's probably very triggering for drug addicts. But I think it's also great TV for a drug addict. It's a lot of fun, and I know a lot of people in the Dopey Nation love it. And
I think the other thing I think is great, though, also is the way that it ties all these trauma, not just to drug addiction, but to all the different addictions that we all suffer from. You know what I mean? Because it isn't just drug addiction. There's relational addictions, there's sex addictions, there's TV addictions. There's all these different ways we try to plug these fucking holes beyond the chemicals. And I think the show does a really good job of connecting those dots, how all these different traumas feed into those different kinds of ways that we're trying to numb the pain, not just chemical ways.
Right. I mean, it also just shows it's not a good time. You know what I mean? Like high
That's
school.
the other part. Yeah, it's like drugs. Like again, there's that one episode where Zendaya has that monologue where it's like it's really fun for a minute and then it's not fun anymore. And I think that does a really good job of not glamorizing the drug stuff.
Well, not only that, the sex stuff. You know,
the sex stuff too, right? It makes it really awkward and painful and weird. Yeah.
I mean, like Nate's dad. I mean, I thought they would delve more into. I mean, they have a lot of fertile ground that they could really delve into a little bit more. And I mean, hopefully season 2 will, if they fucking get a couple more like people in. I think Sam Levinson is a genius, but I think he needs a little help to make it that next level fucking thing.
Yeah, I think he can't. He did so much this season. I think he needs to bring in some other voices for next season.
But I want Sam Levinson to come on Dopey, and I hope this review doesn't make him not want to come on. What do you think? You think we're mostly positive, right?
I think this is very positive. I think that we recognize, a lot of what he's going for, and I think that we recognize also not just that, but just how well made the show is, which is like really a total a victory in and of itself. The show's cool looking. It's really fucking well made. I mean, cinematically, every episode there was something that I was super impressed with.
Yeah, it's a beautiful show. They just need a couple fucking tightening up things to make it that next level. But Devin, I love having a real fucking reviewer come on the old Dopey show and make it happen. So thank you so much. And
thank you.
Fucking hell, be in touch, man.
All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Right on, man. Thank you. So there was the big Euphoria review with sober TV and film reviewer Devin Faraci. I thought that was cool. I also wanted to talk a little bit about fucking Stranger Things Season 3. I haven't finished it yet, but I have to say it kind of fucking sucks. I mean, they do so many stupid fucking schmaltzy fucking over-the-top things. I don't know how people think it's good. Linda watched the end of it, and she said it got much better. But if you guys want to start talking about Stranger Things 3rd season and you don't think it's too schmaltzy, I'd like to hear from you at dopeypodcast@gmail.com. You feel free. And now we are at the end of the show, the time we do the Dopey business. This is the Dopey business portion of the show, and I'd like to read an email. It's not a particularly dopey story, but it is from our most prominent woman fan of color. Her name is Adira. She says, Dave, as your resident African-American devout Dopey listener, I had to let you know how the use of the word wigger made me feel. So here's our most favorite woman of color listener, Adira, dropping science on the word wigger.
Hey Dave, it's Adira, black girl extraordinaire from Michigan. Played my email or my voicemail, I don't know, a couple months back as it pertained to white privilege and the show having mainly a white audience or whatever. And I called and you played my voicemail and I still feel like a celebrity because of that. In any event, I still love your podcast, still love you, I still love what you're doing. I did, however, want to comment on your use of the word wigger. It was, I don't know, maybe about a podcast ago, 196. It was when you talked to Ray and your friend Sam, and it was a great podcast. And you were describing this character named John that Sam and you knew, and you used the term wigger. And you did say you were using it to describe his character and that he, dressed and acted a certain way. And I knew what you meant by that, and I knew how you were trying to use it. I just wanted to let you know, however, because if we don't have these conversations and talk about things like that, we never know, that the term wigger is extremely offensive to most African Americans. Maybe not all, but to me it definitely is. And I want to just give you a quick reason why, because I know you were not using it with any malice whatsoever. However, when you say wigger, it does a few things for me. First of all, you were talking about this guy, John, who apparently listened to 50 Cent, you said, wore basketball jerseys and T-shirts, and was extremely disrespectful to women. And to me, it's offensive. And so you call that person a wigger. And what that implies is that, number one, that a black person is a nigger, and anyone acting as if they are black is a wigger. And it's a bit offensive, if you know what I'm saying. It also makes the implication that for somebody to listen to hip-hop and talk like they're a rap star or whatever you want to call it, and dress a certain way, listen to certain music, and treat women a certain way, that is indicative of being a black person, also known as a nigger. And it's just offensive. And I know you did not mean to use it in that way, but I just kind of wanted to give you some insight on that because it made me uncomfortable, I'm not going to lie. And what I love about you is that you do seem to care about what the fans and people that listen to this podcast think. I don't think you should put too much stock into the haters and people that tell you you're a dick and they're assholes. And so I wanted to just tell you that in a loving way, in a way that, maybe you would see it a different way from a black person's perspective, that, blacks don't all act the same way. Somebody listening to hip-hop and behaving like an idiot is not characteristic of just a black person. And so when you say wigger, I don't know if that makes sense to you. Do you see what I'm saying? The implication there is that, a black or a white person acting as if they were black, quote unquote, would be a wigger. And it also, again, implies that there's a specific way that black people act, and the way that they act was how he was acting, So I don't know. I just wanted to give you a little bit of that to chew on, and I think you'll be pretty receptive to it. It's only because I'm not high and I work a program and I'm a lot less of a lunatic that I was even able to articulate this to you in a way that wasn't like shitty and bitchy and, militant. And I feel like, when you tell people things like that, in the way, when you tell them in a kind way, that they're more, more apt to receive it as constructive criticism. Anyhow, I still listen to you every week. I still love you. I still love the podcast, and I hope this doesn't annoy you, and I hope that you, I don't know, maybe learn a little something from it. I don't know, man. Keep doing what you're doing. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you, Adira, for sending that in. I really like that voicemail. I like how sober it is, and I like that it's, I think it's important for people who listen to the show, if they hear something they don't like, to say something and say why they don't like it. I was talking about this dude, John, with Sam, and he was a dude from my past that we'd drive around listening to 50 Cent, and he would scream, "Let me hit that," at women who walk by. And at the time, and even to this day, I thought it was really funny. And when I described John, I said he had a certain wigger charm. And I thought I was being funny. And in a bubble, in a world away from anybody else, in my head, it's funny. But when I hear Adira's point, I certainly don't want to hurt Adira. I don't want to hurt anybody with language just because I think it's funny. So I will remove the word from my lexicon. It is gone. And I want to thank you. And I also just love the way Adira laid it down in terms of her recovery, that she could have been nasty, but instead she wanted to find common ground and she wanted to explain where she was coming from. I don't feel a need to explain where I was coming from because I was just trying to be funny, but I definitely don't want to be funny and hurt anybody like that. So I'm sorry, Adira, and thank you for sending it in. I'm sorry for anything I might have said that offended anybody in the past, and I am sorry if I say anything in the future that might bother anybody, because I'm sure that could happen. Now, before we go, I would like to, as Chris always would say, hit you guys with a little dopey. And here is an email I just got. It's from Jennifer, and she writes, "Hi, Dave. Hope you and the fam are well. I loved the Remembering Chris episode, even though it was heartbreaking to listen to. I've binged on Dopey over the past few months, and it wasn't until a week or two ago I was lying in bed and it truly hit me that he was gone. Like, forever gone. I can't imagine how you must feel. He was an amazing, kind, hilarious, wonderful weirdo, and I identify with him so much. I really miss hearing you two crack up together. Your dynamic and friendship was just wonderful. I know some people on Reddit are giving you flack, saying the show was better with Chris, blah, blah, but please don't let that get to you. I didn't know Chris personally, but I'm 100% sure he would want you to keep going and carry the message like you've mentioned. Maybe the one positive thing with his passing, it's that it makes it more real to the rest of us just how fucking deadly this addiction shit is. And you're doing a fantastic job on your own. I hope you know that. So I thought I'd share another Dopey story. In 12-step/addiction circles, I guess you would call me a chronic relapser and a trash can junkie garbage head. Basically, I love all drugs as long as they are in front of me. I've always preferred downers, but I'm not picky. My first round of rehab was as a teen, but somehow I was able to stop and got a good chunk of clean time. Anyway, in my second really bad round of addiction, I was working as a social worker in this lockdown psych ward. Before I started the job, I had started smoking weed again, then got a Xanax prescription for my anxiety, and then, after breaking my ankle, I got the taste for opiates. Of course, I didn't tell the doctors about my addiction history so I could get as many pills as possible. Anyway, while working on this unit, I was pretty high. I was high pretty much every day at work. I would roll a joint on my way to the job, pop a bunch of Klonopin, take some perks, add a 5-hour energy shot, and sail throughout my day. I would occasionally do coke in the bathroom if I got too sleepy. Funnily enough, I did really well at that job, and since I was high every day, no one knew what I looked or acted like when I was sober. Unfortunately, one day, I left my little bag that had my coke in it in the employee bathroom. My supervisor found it, and somehow or other I convinced her that it was actually just crushed up Klonopins that I had been prescribed, and I explained that I crushed it up because my doctor told me it would work better. For whatever goddamn reason, she believed me and gave it back to me. I think it's because they were in such a bad position, lots of employee turnover, whatever, and I was such a good worker, she believed it, or at least was willing to look the other way. Needless to say, after that I started formulating my exit plan, since clearly they were on to me, and eventually I put in my notice. So I'm out of work for 2 or 3 months, as the job market in 2009 was no bueno. During those months, my opiate addiction really kicked in, and I finally realized that I am royally fucked, getting sick every day, etc., despite that I'm applying to all these jobs and somehow land the job of my dreams at this hospital. I nailed the interview, probably because I was a little manic and extremely enthusiastic. And I'm an addict, so I can talk a good game. I get my start date. The night before my start date, I realize I am fucked because I couldn't get my hands on enough pills not to get sick. However, I have plenty of Soma, Ativan, and 2 or 3 10-milligram Vicodin. I decide if I take them all, I should be able to avoid getting sick and will be fine for my first day of work. So I take them, and the last thing I remember is vacuuming my house, because for some reason when I got high, I try to get things accomplished that I don't like doing sober. The next thing I remember is paramedics in my living room and seeing lights flashing outside. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing here? They're like, ma'am, it appears you've had an overdose. You need to come to the hospital with us. I'm like, fuck that, no way. Making a big fucking scene and embarrassing myself, which is par for the course at this point. They reiterate that I have to go and basically drag me to the stretcher. I say fine, but I need my cigarettes or I'm not going anywhere. Meanwhile, all my neighbors are outside looking at me like I'm a crazy person, which I am. It was like an episode of Cops. They give me my cigarettes and then I black out again and wake up the next day in the hospital. My partner is there with me, all worried, and I feel like shit. I immediately want a cigarette. They tell me I can't go outside. I go out anyway with my IV drip, but wind up falling over in front of a whole bunch of people after the first 2 drags because the Soma Ativan Vicodin combo is still in my blood, and I'm all loosey-goosey. I have to go back into the hospital in a wheelchair. Eventually, I say what I need to say and get just discharged. I call my new job and explain I had food poisoning and that I can start the next day. When I get home, I pop some more pills and smoke and fall asleep, and on my way to work on the first day, I wind up getting in a car accident because I'm still so fucked up from the drugs in my system. Luckily, I was able to pretend to be normal and didn't get a DUI. Long story short, I lose the new job because they quickly caught on that I'm a horrible drug addict, and that was that. Good part is I'm 9 months clean now. 10 years later. LOL. Stay strong, Dopey Nation, and toodles for Chris. And that is from Jen. Thank you, Jen. I love that email. I love the end of it. I love that I'm 9 months clean 10 years later. I think that really tells, it just tells that's the story of addiction for me. And all the other stuff I like too. I appreciate that. Anybody send in a Dopey voicemail? I have a ton of Dopey voicemails. Send more. Next week is the 200th episode of Dopey, a.k.a. Christmas. And I really, really, really want you guys to be a part of it. So please send in super short voicemails. You know, happy 200th, Merry Christmas, just kind of like what Dopey means to you in a short, like 5 to 30 second voicemail so I can play a ton of them. We love it when you guys are a part of the show. This is the way to do it. If not, follow us on Reddit, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Twitter, leave a review for my dad, and stay strong, Dopey Nation, and fucking toodles for Chris, who we miss.
My shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and it's time to where I stand. My shadow is getting smaller and smaller, and it's time to where I stand. I wonder, should they pay it any mind when I leave this busted city far behind? Bad desires.